We're very fortunate at Adat Ariel, and it's one of the things that I've always appreciated and was very fortunate to inherit as a senior rabbi here, to have a darshan program, to have a program that allows us to invite lay people to come up and to share words of Torah, so that we understand that the Torah is the possession of all and not just the possession of a select few. It is also very fortunate for me because it allows me on occasion to introduce my friends as darshanim, which is fortunate because my friends get to hear me speak and share their feedback and what they thought of what I said. And now I'm going to get to do the same. But I get to do the same for a very good friend of mine, a friend who has shown himself in so many ways to be thoughtful, intelligent, articulate, and certainly someone who I've enjoyed having many discussions with, arguments with, and certainly have felt very fortunate to have as a part of my life. It's a pleasure to be able to share the bima this morning with my friend, with Eddy Klein.
You had your chance. Before I begin my remarks, one issue of housekeeping. I know a lot of you came here this morning to see Evan Greenspan speak. After the service, please see the rabbi for a full refund. If you enjoy my remarks, you can tell me. If not, you can direct your comments to Evan. I want to talk this morning about justice, and I want to talk about three sets of numbers, but no, there will be no math involved. The numbers I want to talk about are 34, 35, and 36, 7, and 24601. It was about a month ago when those of us in California and all across the United States went to the ballot box. And at the bottom of the ballot in California were our famous propositions. And normally, our propositions deal with relatively mundane things, no offense to my brother-in-law, but redistricting, taxes, things of that nature. But this year we had three propositions, 34, 35, and 36, which struck me as unusually important because they dealt with the fundamental issues of crime and punishment. You may or may not remember, but 34 was to abolish the death penalty. Proposition 35 dealt with increasing penalties for human trafficking, and 36 was to reform our three strikes law to make it only applicable to serious felonies. I don't want to debate any of those. I actually don't even recall how they came out. But I think we should all stop and think about what a unique and important obligation that imposed upon us. It asked us to decide what would happen, how we should penalize those in our community who are convicted of crimes, those who among us are the outsiders, the outcasts. So that's what I was thinking about. That's what I had on my mind when I started thinking about my remarks this morning. And when I went and I read the Torah portion, the first number I came across was, of course, 7. The Pharaoh's dream had 7 healthy cows, 7 sickly cows, 7 healthy ears of corn, and 7 bad ears of corn. And as the rabbi alluded to a few minutes ago, when giving Jared's charge, none of Pharaoh's wise men could interpret the dream to Pharaoh's satisfaction. But then they told him about Joseph, and Pharaoh sent for Joseph. So my question is, and yes, day schoolers are allowed to answer, where was Joseph when Pharaoh sent for him? In jail. And why was he in jail? It's not in this week's Parsha, but for those of you who were here last week, you'll remember that what happened is when Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, he ultimately ended up being bought by Potiphar. Is that how you say it, by the way?
Potiphar.
Potiphar.
Or Potiphar.
It's not a common name, so I struggled with a little bit. And he's doing quite well as the head of that household until Potiphar's wife takes a strong liking to him. And Joseph, to his credit, does not respond to her overtures, but finally, frustrated, she makes up a story that Joseph attacked her. And as a result, Potiphar puts Joseph in jail. And that's where we find him when Pharaoh calls for him to help interpret his dreams. We know, because we've read the entire story, that Joseph actually did absolutely nothing wrong. Now, getting back to the story where we picked up today, you'll remember that Joseph's father, Jacob, is among those who's basically starving during the 7 years of famine. So he sends his sons, except for Benjamin, down to Egypt to ask for grain. And of course, by now, Joseph is in charge of doling out the food. Well, this leads to a series of events which culminate in the brothers going back to get Benjamin and bringing him back to Egypt. And that's where things get really twisted. As the brothers are sleeping and getting ready to go back with their grain, Joseph tells his steward to fill their bags with grain and money. But he also tells him to take his silver goblet and put it in Benjamin's bag. The brothers wake up the next morning, they take off, and shortly after they're gone, Joseph then commands his steward to go and after the brothers and to ask them why they have stolen his silver goblet. And the steward does as he's told. He catches them and he asks them, "Why did you repay good with evil?" In other words, here Joseph gave you all this grain, all this money, and you went and stole his goblet. Again, we know that Joseph is being falsely accused, that Joseph is falsely accusing his brothers at this point, just as Joseph had been falsely accused. Well, at this time, the brothers think that the steward is absolutely out of his mind for making this ridiculous accusation. They're so sure of their innocence that they offer to literally die if one of them is caught having stolen it. And sure enough, as each bag is checked one after another, it's not there. And they get to Benjamin's bag, and of course, there is the goblet. They all go back to Joseph's home in Egypt, and he confronts them and says, "What did you think you were doing? Did you think I wouldn't know about this? I'm capable of divining such things." If you want to know how that particular story ends, you'll have to come back next week. When I was reading about the silver goblet, one of the first things that struck me about this disingenuous accusation was a scene from Les Miserables. No, I didn't read the entire thing in French, but I did see the musical. And you'll remember there that when he's in prison, Jean Valjean is referred to as 24601. Totally devoid of any humanity, he's reduced to a number. And when he gets out of prison, he's destitute, he has to wear something identifying him as an ex-con, and no one will give him a job, he's got no money, he has nothing. He's taken in, however, by the local bishop. And during the night, while the bishop's asleep, he steals the bishop's silverware, and he flees. Well, when he's captured by the police, he's brought back to the bishop's house, just as the steward brought back the brothers to Joseph's house. But instead of accusing him of stealing the silverware, which he in fact did in this case, the bishop says, no, he didn't steal that. It was a gift for me, he tells the police. And he says, and in fact, you left so quickly that you forgot to take these 2 candlesticks, which are even more valuable. In this instance, far from repaying good with evil, the bishop is repaying Valjean's evil with his goodness. Now, if you want to know how this story ends, the movie's coming out in a couple weeks. In each of these stories, we as the audience have the benefit of being omniscient observers. We know exactly what is going on. We don't have to rely on what others are saying about what occurred. We know what happened and can judge for ourselves whether justice was done in this particular situation. The word in Hebrew for justice is tzedek. But tzedek has more than a strictly legal meaning. It also includes righteousness. In other words, in our tradition, it is not enough to be legally correct. Justice includes being morally correct, being righteous. In Mishpatim, we are told, quote, if you take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you must return it to him before sunset, if it is only clothing. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, explained that although the lender has the legal right to keep the clothing until he is repaid, that doesn't make it the right thing to do. Probably the most famous use of the word tzedek in the Torah is in Shoftim, where it says, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. In fact, the entire phrase is tzedek, tzedek tirdof, ve'aman tichyeh v'yarashta et ha'aretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach. Justice, justice you shall pursue, so that you may thrive and inhabit the land that God is giving you. In other words, the pursuit of justice is a condition for the Jewish people to thrive. A great deal of ink has been spilled about why the word tzedek is repeated in this phrase, but let me offer my own interpretation. The repetition is an emphatic reminder of the dual nature of justice in our tradition. It includes not only what is legally correct, but also what is morally correct, what is righteous. So when we are given the opportunity to address justice in our own lives, whether at the ballot box or in more prosaic circumstances, we should remember that as Jews, we are commanded to pursue justice and righteousness so that we may thrive in the world we have. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom.